For the Detroit Lions, they're always on the lookout for disruptive playmakers, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about a guy that has absolutely freakish potential in that category. Stay tuned, everybody.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and with that being said, we're diving on in. So, here's the thing, folks. Obviously, we already know that, the first wave of free agency has officially gotten underway. It's already in full swing. The Lions have made a couple of acquisitions. They've made a couple of acquisitions, all of them primarily being on the defensive side of the ball. If I recall correctly, they acquired 2 cornerbacks, they've acquired a defensive interior lineman, and they've acquired an edge rusher. And so, what we're seeing already is that the Lions are officially, like, the rest of the NFL, they are officially starting the process of assembling and adding talent to their roster to prepare for the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, I'm going to say this. The closer that we get to the NFL Draft, I would say that for most fans, they have a good sense of what the teams that they're rooting for are going to do. There's a good grasp, there's a good bead on what most teams are looking for, that what most teams are going to need to improve based upon what they did get in free agency, what they didn't get in free agency, what they lost in free agency. A lot of what happens for the draft is predicated about what you do in free agency, or sometimes what you don't do in free agency. And when we think about it, the draft is a good place for not only to find players that are good for depth and development, it's also a good place to find starting talent. Now, being able to find the difference between those two, that sometimes is a bit of an art that most GMs sometimes have a hard time being able to distinguish from. But if there's one thing us Lions fans know, is that Brad Holmes is able to not only distinguish the two, but he's absolutely probably one of the best, if not the best GM in the NFL for being able to say, okay, this guy is talented, but maybe he's not ready to be a starter yet, or this guy is really talented, and this guy could be an instant impact player and a starter for us. So, that's one of the great things about the draft, is that you can continue to look, and you can dive deeper and deeper into the draft, and you will almost always find another stone that you can turn over and potentially find a hidden gem, potentially find that diamond in the rough, or just find a player that maybe you weren't looking at originally. So, if there's one thing also we know about the Lions, is that they're always, and I mean this, they are always on the lookout for good players who have upside, who can develop into necessarily a role player or a depth player, or sometimes even a good starter for them. They're always looking for good players. And I would say this, any team that's worth its weight in gold is absolutely going to want to find those players that are good players. And they are going to scour far and wide. They are going to look everywhere and anywhere they can to get as much possible information on them. So, when we think about it, the Lions this year are absolutely in a perfect spot for this draft, because this draft, in my opinion, has plenty of potential players who could fit the criteria of what Brad Holmes is looking for. Like I said, maybe they're a role player that could develop into a starter, or maybe they're an instant starter, whatever the case might be. But when we're talking about this player in particular, we're talking about this player. There's a reason why I put heavy emphasis on this player, because this player is very, very interesting. He's intriguing. I definitely think the Lions are going to want to take a keen look at him. And the player I'm specifically referring to is this. And that is defensive end edge rusher Brandon Dorlus. Now, I'm going to say this. Brandon Dorlus is a very intriguing, he is a very interesting prospect. And the reason why he is an interesting prospect is because you have to think about what he can provide to the Lions, not only in terms of a schematic or a technical aspect, but also just his physical prowess, his physical nature as a player. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about both of those aspects really quickly, and we're going to show you some highlights along the way, so that That way you guys can get a little bit of a better feel for who this guy is. Sound good? Let's get into it. So, first things first, let's talk about the schematic aspect. What could this guy realistically do for the Detroit Lions if the Lions were to actually acquire him? What would he be able to provide? Well, I'm going to tell you this right now. One of the things that instantaneously drew me to Dorlus is the fact that this guy has extreme versatility. This dude has played virtually almost every single spot on the defensive line. He's played inside, he's played A-gap, B-gap, he's played edge. This is a guy that has versatility that's all over the defensive line. This is a dude that for a line you would love to have, because what it does is it gives you a sheer crap ton amount of depth. Because think about it. Think about this for a minute. You have a defensive line unit, which usually will have anywhere between 4 to 5 guys that are down. You have a guy that you can literally almost plug in every single spot on that defensive line. That right there gives you 2 very, very key edges when it comes to opposing offenses and offensive lines. Number 1, that means that you can plug that guy in virtually anywhere, and you can rotate him in and out on any spot on that line. Which, what does that do? It allows other guys to, number 1, first and foremost, get a breather and recover their strength, recover their stamina. But also, number 2, it also means that no matter where you plug him in, chances are you're going to get a decent to good result. Which, when you're talking about a guy that's that versatile, it really speaks volumes to his flexibility and his, I would say his value to a team. Because it's like, listen, if I put him out on the edge, I know he's going to do fine on the edge. If I want to put him inside, I can put him on inside. That right there is something that Brandon Dorlus provides. He can play both outside and inside when it comes to the line, which at that point allows you to rotate people in and out almost flawlessly and seamlessly. The second thing that this provides as a keen edge is, think about this, folks. When you're talking about most defensive linemen, they usually like to stay in one spot or another. Case in point, we know Aiden Hutchinson can play both inside and outside, but where he primarily lines up is outside on the left-hand side of the formation, opposite of the right tackle. So 9 times out of 10, most offenses know that's where he's coming from. But when you're talking about Brandon Dorlus, for a guy that literally can play just about anywhere on that line because of his size, and that's a key thing here. This guy literally has size that literally can work just about anywhere. If I recall correctly, he's like 6'3", almost 300 pounds. And he's got decent enough speed to where he can, as I said, play outside and play inside. But the power, as I'm about to talk about here in a moment, is where he really has the ability to play inside. But my whole point of the matter is this. Aiden Hutchinson out on the edge, that's where you normally expect him. If you have a guy like Dorlus who can literally line inside, outside, and you're going to still get the same effect, you want to know what that starts doing to the psyche of an offensive line? They don't know where in the hell he's coming from play to play, series to series, down to down. And that starts really messing with offensive lines past, their blocking schemes. Because it's like, okay, could this guy go inside? Could this guy go outside? What stunts are they going to run? It starts to really mess with the blocking schemes and the blocking protections, because now you've got guys that are like, well, who got who? They're like, who do you have? Because then it's like, hey, if this guy goes this way, do I have him or do I have him? That is what you can realistically get from somebody like Dorlus, because I'm telling you, it offers an immense amount of flexibility in terms of game planning, because it's like, hey, if this guy can do just about anything I ask him, it really opens up the variability that I can use on that defensive line to be even more disruptive, which for a lot of Lions fans is something they are dying to see, because they want to see quarterbacks get knocked on their rear against us more times than not. So, I'm telling you this right now. Those are 2 very keen, I would say, schematic or, technical aspects to Dorlus's game that I think Lions fans and the Lions would seriously love to have. So, that's the schematical aspect. Now let's talk about the physical aspect. And I'm telling you this right now. Like I said, this guy listed at 6'3", 290, 300 pounds. This guy has the ability to play both inside and outside. And the reason why is because he has enough speed to play outside at edge. If I recall correctly, I think his 40 time was like 4.7, 4.8, something like that. But His inside ability is where I really see him making a lot of good contributions because this dude is freakishly strong. Again, if you take a look, this guy was listed number 51 on Bruce Feldman's freak list. And there's a reason why this dude got on the list. Take a look at what Feldman wrote in that report. He wrote that this guy can do a 685-pound back squat, a 685-pound sumo deadlift, a 345-pound power clean, and I don't know how accurate this one is, but I'm going to take it for its face value. Supposedly, this guy can run on GPS up to 20.75 miles per hour. So it's like, okay, you're talking about a guy that is not only, one, talented and can play on multiple positions of said defensive line, but you are also talking about a guy that is freakishly strong. I'm telling you this right now. There are guys that I know that will not be able to do this kind of lifting. This is like ridiculously strong. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's the strongest man ever. That's not what I'm saying. But it's like, dude, for a guy his size to be able to move things that are literally 2 to 3 times heavier than him, and you're just like, moving it with that much force, that right there gets my eyes popping. That right there gets my ears perking up because it's like, okay, this dude is freakishly strong. And that right there, as a defensive lineman, is something you want. You want that raw power. You want that strength. You want that ability to move and get people off of their spots when you're a defensive lineman. Because if you can break double teams, if you can fly past people, you can get them off their spots. And that's why I'm going to start showing you some of these highlights, because you're going to see in these highlights the raw power that I'm talking about. You're going to see what this guy can do on a football field. He is extremely disruptive and dominant when it comes to some of the opponents that he's against. And that, I believe, is his ability to combine both power and speed. So when you think about all of that, you take a look at all of the information and all the evidence I provided here, I'm just going to say this right now. We know the Lions went out and signed Marcus Davenport. We know they went out and signed defensive interior man DJ Reader. But I'm going to say this right now. Despite the fact that the Lions went out and signed those two, I do not think for 1 minute that should even slightly discourage the Lions from going out and, potentially grabbing Brandon Dorlus. And here's the reason why. Number one, what is the two things we already know highly and most importantly about Davenport and Reader? They are both coming off season-ending injuries from their previous respective ball clubs. Davenport had a season-ending injury, I think it was to his ankle with the Vikings, and Reader is coming off a season-ending injury to his, what was it? I think it's to his leg. I'm trying to remember what the muscle is, but I can't remember what it was. But I know it was a season-ending injury. So you got two guys that are coming off of their season-ending injuries. And now that I think about it, I think it was his quad. Either way, point of the matter is season-ending injuries for both of these guys. It would be a very prudent, very wise thing to have another option behind those two guys that can play both of those positions. It would be good to have an insurance policy is what I'm getting at. So that's number one. Number two, if there's one thing I know from playing football, if there's one thing I know just from competitive sports, having more guys around, having more competition, all that does is increase the ability to get the best out of your players. And it's like, listen, if you got a guy like Brandon Dorlus who's young, he's full of, all this energy, and he's ready to show what he can do, and he's ready to prove himself, and you start putting him opposite of guys like what I just said, Davenport, and, Reader, and all the other guys that are already there, all that's going to do is make him better, which is then in turn going to make the rest of the guys better. So for me, it's like competition from within that group. If you were to get Dorlus, all that's going to do is make it an even better group. And let's just understand this for what it is. The Lions have a good amount of depth on that defensive line, but you can always add more. And it's like, listen, like I said, for the ability for him to play most of the positions on the defensive line, you add a rotational piece to give other guys breathers, or be like, hey, this guy's on a hot streak. Let's stick him in for a couple more plays. Let's see what this guy can really do. That's what I'm saying. The Lions, if they were to go after Dorlus, could really open up a Pandora's box of opportunities that would really, in my opinion, benefit them, because it's like, hey, You could literally see this man take over games if you realistically allow him to do his thing. And from what I've seen in his highlights, this guy can do a lot of things that the Lions faithful would definitely like to see. So, having said all that, I'm going to end the episode here, and I just want to say to everyone, thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and not had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe. It helps out the channel, and I'm thankful for each one that I can get. But also, I ask you, please make sure you turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers, they're always going up, but we want to make sure you turn on that notification icon so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. I also encourage y'all to please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we share it, the greater the channel spreads and the greater the channel grows. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope y'all are having a great day. I hope y'all are having something that makes you smile, and I just want to say to everybody, hope y'all enjoyed the content. God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see y'all in the next episode.